All right, everyone, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Try and keep us on time. I'm like watching the Zoom online and my brain is a little wonky right now. So welcome to our kickoff rocks and rolls for fall semester. I'm really excited. You know, I love this colloquium series. So today we're going to talk about serious games, and I'm totally biased because this is something our group has been working on, and I think it's a really cool concept about how we both look at, I think you're going to talk more from the perspective of seeing how people behave using games, and then we're trying to see how we can use games to like teach geoscience concepts and really get some more buy-in that way. So we have two amazing speakers up here today who are going to talk to you about this. And then I also just wanted to give you a heads up. We're going to have a next, or On the Rocks will be October 27th at 3:30 at SNS across the street. And then November 30th is the next Rocks and Rolls. We're actually co-sponsoring that one with the KU Department of Geology. So it'll be here at noon with Sarah Morton, who's a KGS alumni. So thank you all. Go ahead.
All right. I hope you can all hear me. Okay. Yeah. Cool. So hello everybody. My name is Malena Orduña. I'm here to present serious games for education and research. Come on. Work. I can do this. No. Can I do this? There. There you go. Ta-da. So my goal for this presentation is to introduce you to the concept of serious games and how can we use it for geoscience education and research, but also to inspire you to play more games in general and to even create your own games. We will start by understanding what serious games are and their role in geoscience. Then I'll talk about my favorite example, a very famous board game that you might not think is serious, but it's actually serious. And then we will talk more into how to make a game. For this, we need the three main concepts. What types of games are there? What are the key elements that we need to take into consideration? And what is the development process to make a serious game? So let's begin. What is serious game? Serious game is there are games that are developed for other than just having fun. This was a concept that was coined by Clark Abt in 1975, where he argued that games could be a very powerful tool for education. But let's not be confused by the name. It is an oxymoron. Serious games are fun, but at the same time, they need to be meaningful. So if it's not fun, it's not a game. I want you to be very clear on this, because the more I go into this, then they'll think, oh, this is just an activity. But no, it is a game. It is a challenge, but it needs to be meaningful and entertaining at the same time. So what it means is serious games have a utility or a purpose or a goal with game elements. There are other terms out there that can be used instead of serious game. I just like the term serious game because it's like an umbrella. Maybe you have heard of game-based learning, which is this approach to use games in education. So here the utility is just teaching. If you hear gamification, means adding game elements to pre-established utility, sort of like you have a topic for your class and then you add a game there. That could be another type of serious games. Or the opposite, when you have a fun game and then you add serious topics like, for example, Minecraft, or board games that they just put the environmental things on it, or even Fortnite. I've seen it that they teach kids. I don't know how a game that is about killing each other teaches environmental science, but I've done it. So those are the terms that we can hear. I like the term serious games because it's just a very broad umbrella term, meaning it's a game that will teach you or you will learn from it, but also you will have fun. Many industries have used it, especially now with the increase of digital technologies like virtual reality and computer games. It's a really increasing topic using serious games. Like the most popular one probably be the Army one, where they teach people how to act in specific situations. It's completely virtual reality. Is super cool. But one of the industries that is growing more in implementing this education and actually research. But why, you might ask? I thought about the 5 main advantages. They boost player engagement and motivation because they're 100% goal oriented. You want to win the game. There are games that I know that the goal is to lose the game, but that's actually how you win the game. So you know what I'm trying to say. It's trying to reach that goal. You can experiment with actions in a risk-free setting before applying those things that you learn in real life. You can learn from your mistakes and then go back and play it again. There is an extensive data collection benefits from playing games. Extensive, I tell you. And there's also like improvement of soft skills like critical thinking, creative problem solving, learning retention, and even social bonding that could happen during the games. In geoscience specifically, these games are designed to provide players with an immersive experience that simulate the real world scenarios. This allows to tackle environmental issues while experiencing also the consequences of your own decision. So for example, if we are playing a game about climate change and you think you have the solution, then you can try it in the game and then realize, oh, well, might not be the solution. You can try another thing. The main objectives that I have seen in literature so far for games, for serious games in geoscience, are to raise awareness about sustainability and also to even influence players' behaviors to better protect the environment. So those are the main objectives. It's very difficult to evaluate serious games because most of the time these projects, you don't write a paper about it or give talks like this. It's just a physical thing that it's there and then you play it maybe once or twice and then nobody evaluates how these games were even made or their effectiveness. But in 2017, there was a paper that evaluated 25. And in this paper, they found that there were 5 main types of games: video, board game, card games, online games, and hybrid games, which are very interesting because in these, there are games for research where you have a mathematical model and a game, and the game is used to collect data for that model in specific. So you target this game for a specific audience, or specific students, or so on. And then the main themes in these evaluated games were environmental education that includes like climate change, conflict resolution, and general environmental topics. Also water resources, like irrigation and urban water management, and resource management and ecology. Since 2017, I have seen an increase in hybrid simulation games, games in ecology, and like virtual reality games that are really cool. There is one from the UK of a colleague of mine that made a flood in virtual reality. So you put the glasses and then the flood is coming and you need to react to it. It's super, super cool. I hope I can bring it to you guys because it's a really amazing experience. And you need to protect your city from the flood. It's super cool. And you learn so many topics about it. So now let's go to my favorite example. And this is going to be a bit of a tangent, but I promise you there is a point. My favorite example of a serious game is Monopoly. And I know you all have played it and you maybe even hate it. It's okay, I hate it too. But have you ever wondered where the origin story of Monopoly is? Anybody of you guys know? All right, cool. I love this. I love talking about this topic. You might have heard of the tale of Charles Darrow, an unemployed man from Philadelphia in the 1930s that dreamed about a board game and turned it into reality. He saved the Parker brothers and himself from financial ruin. Amazing story, right? American dream, Cinderella story. Here's the twist. It is not right. The Monopoly roots trace back to this amazing, amazing woman. So her name is Elizabeth Maggie. She was born in Illinois in 1866. She lived a highly unusual life. She was a secretary, a stenographer. She dabbled in poetry and stand-up comedy. And in her free time, that I really don't know how she had free time with that CV, she created a board game that reflected her political beliefs. The seeds of monopoly were planted when her father, James Maggie, showed her this book about progress and poverty by Henry James that was written in 1879. Then in 1904, 17 years before women were allowed to vote, let's just get how innovative she was. She patented a game called the landlord's game, where it had familiar phrases like they go to jail, the railroad spaces, the free parking, and most importantly, which for me blows my mind because I play a lot of board games, it was the first patent that had a continuous path. Before, games think like snakes and ladders or so on, they had a start and an end. So you start the game in one point of the board and then you end it in the other. Whereas she created a continuous, and this is why Monopoly is never ending, right? So that's super cool. She created two set of rules. One was anti-monopolist, that it was called the prosperity, where the generation of wealth was all the players benefit from it. And the other one, the monopolist, which was called the landlord's game, where you needed to dominate and create monopolies like the monopoly that we know. In this dualistic approach, it was a study of economics and specific tax system that was coming up on those times that we're talking the Great Depression and the rising of monopolies that we know today. Her goal was that if you play both games, you realize that the prosperity game was better. But unfortunately, the monopolist rules, the landlord game, became really famous. It was even played in Harvard and Columbia. The Quakers in Atlantic City really embraced it, and they put their own neighborhoods in the board. And this was the version that a friend, taught Charles Darrow. He never dreamed about it. He just heard it and then changed it from a square to a circular motion. Then he sold these to the Parker brothers, and they not only sold the game, but they sold this story of unemployed mind becoming a millionaire, like the Monopoly guy. It was hidden completely until 1973, where a professor of economics, Ralph Ansbach, he created an anti-monopoly. So he had the same idea that Elizabeth Maggie had almost 100 years before, where it's like, monopolies are not cool, maybe we should not teach this to kids. And he created this anti-monopoly game, and he was in a 10-year-long battle with Parker brothers, who are now at Hasbro. He actually won the legal battle, but then he became a board game detective and found that Maggie's patents, and she even spoke out in the newspapers at that time saying like, hey, this is my game, it's not his, but nobody listened. If you really want to hear about this story, there is an amazing book called The Monopolist. It tells a story about the Great Depression, how board games became popular at that time, because now you have electricity and people were staying more at home and so on. It's an amazing book. I totally recommend it. It's not only about Monopoly, the game, but it's how the story goes. My point was, Monopoly was from the beginning a serious game. There was another utility, another purpose, was to teach economics and to show anti-landlord policies. Then they tried to kind of remove the series, but it still was serious because it was the cornerstone for entrepreneurs education. You might feel like, I'm really good at Monopoly, so I'm going to study business. So it became an inspiration, but now it's again a serious game, or even more a serious game, because we now can learn about the potential of marketing and how women invention have been silenced. So for me, this is the best example of a serious game. It's something that permanent, that outlives the developers, and that can evolve farther than that. I cannot really think if books and papers can do that. If you create a game, it could just outlive you and can live outside of you, for example. If you want to play, if you have a copy of Monopoly in your house, all dusty and nobody wants to play it anymore, I can give you the rules for the prosperity and the landlord, and you can play it around. And if you're more computational savvy, there is actually a Python program that you can run, and you see the differences. It's really cool. So now let's say we want to make the monopoly for geoscience. We want to become millionaires and have this product that would outlive us. We need three things. We need to know what types of game we can make. We need to know what are the key elements that we need to take into consideration, and we need to know how to make it. What is the development process for that? So I like to categorize serious games specifically for geoscience in three categories. It depends on how the knowledge transfer from developers to players or the other way around, and the main objectives. The first one, we have games for education. Here, this is a tool for teaching to enhance retention and motivation. Here, the knowledge flows from the developer to the players, meaning we are kind of the experts of the topic, and we are teaching it to an audience that does not know about that topic. Then we have games for research, where it's to study how individuals act in specific situations. Here we can collect valuable data and test hypotheses. Here we'll say the knowledge flow from the players, because these are the ones who are studying, to us, to the developers. And then we have games for intervention. These are the most complicated out of three, I would say. These are made to broadcast messages or to raise awareness of specific things. Here the knowledge goes both ways. It's kind of like a not finished game, because it's meant to evolve what you play. So most of the time, these games cannot be replicated because they're made for a specific community, for a specific situation that you want to, for example, farmers, I've seen farmers in Africa that they want to teach them about specific drought sensitive crops. So it's very, very specific for that, but they're still games at the end of the day. So what are the elements that we need to consider? There is a model, the design, playing, and experience model by the digital education strategies, and they identify four main elements. The learning element, which means what is the measurable content that the players are meant to acquire in all games. Doesn't matter if it's a game for education or if it's a game for research, there will be learning there happening from the players. The next element is the storytelling. Basically, what's the story you're trying to say with the game and how these would evolve while playing the game. Then you have the gameplay, how players interact with the game. You have what are the actions, what can the player do, what are the rules itself. And then you have the user experience, which is, if it's a board game, the size of the pieces, how big is the board need to be? If it's a card game, how many cards? How do you shuffle them, and so on? So like, how do you really interact with the game? These elements meant to find a balance between the fun part that I said games must have and the serious part. So if you have that balance, you have a monopoly in your hands, for example. If there is an imbalance, if it's too serious and it's not fun, then people are not gonna play it again. Or if it's too fun and it's too serious, nobody's gonna learn anything from it. So you need to find a good balance on these elements. They all need to be present. So let's talk about kind of like, now that we know the elements, the key elements, now that we know what type of game do we want, what is the process to make a serious game? There are many frameworks out there for specific games. For example, if you want to make a video game about water, there's a framework that you can build. If you want to make a card game about geology, there's another one. But it's very difficult to kind of like replicate those because they're so specific. In 2020, in a study by Jyoti, he came up with this generic framework that is called DICE, which I love. It has four main steps. The first one is define. You define the serious content that the game will have. That includes the target audience. Then you create a game concept. You imagine a concept that aligns to those objectives. Then you develop a prototype. you create your game, and then you evaluate it. Play test the game with other board game developers and with your target audience. And this last step is kind of cyclical. You need to do that until it meets your satisfaction. If your goal is to teach a specific topic, you need to do it until everybody from your target audience. Sometimes this is why I chose the little fandom, because that's the most scary part. Sometimes you think you have the monopoly in your hands, and then you play it, nobody gets it. Oh, fine. And then you play it again. It's like, actually, I don't like the color of this. And then you try again and you try again. And sometimes it's very tedious, but just know that at the end you will have that perfect game that you imagine, you dream, like Charles Darrow said. So I will show this on the game that I made for my PhD. I made a game called Mice, which is the original word for corn. So in this game, I simulated farmer decision making and its impacts on groundwater and crop yield in the very different policy scenarios. So here, players role play as farmers growing corn, and they needed to use groundwater to irrigate that corn. There were two main objectives. One, I wanted to make a board game, a serious board game for research for the general public. I am a board game aficionado, I like to call myself. I play a lot of board games. So I wanted to make a board game that I could grab it and play it on my own home, and I would not get bored. And I can share with all my other friends that play board games. That's like, this is a good game. Like, just play it. I made it, but this is a good game. And the second one was to collect data for a social hydrological model that I was developing. So now that I have these two goals, I imagined the game. It was a hybrid simulation game that presented as a model, but with a Euro-style board game that was designed for 4 players. By Euro-style means the game is more based on strategy than luck. So if you play board games, you will know that there are games that you really need to think about your decisions and pay attention to what the others are doing, and some other just rely on dices and you're like, oh well, these are the cards. Well, my game completely relies on the strategy because that's what I was evaluating. And there is also like multiple ways to score games and to win the game. That's what your style board game means. Then I made the prototype. I designed the artwork and I made most of the things by hand, except those little pieces, like the little coins. Those I bought in bulk, but the rest, everything I made by hand. I made 4 prototypes, which was really expensive because I had to do it again because people didn't like it. But I tested it with students and with other board game developers to ensure its effectiveness. And then the game was live. I had game sessions from April to December of 2019. I traveled around the world. I went to Austria, to Czech Republic. I was living in Germany, so that's pretty easy by train. But to the Netherlands, everybody who wanted to play the game, I would travel, I would go. I even came here to the US and played it. In New Zealand, I played it. So everywhere I was just like, please, let's play the game. I was trying to collect as much data as possible. In those game sessions, I kind of had a careful description of the real system to minimize confirmation bias, because sometimes I would have like students and the professor would know more. So I needed to make sure everybody was in the same level. And then we would play the game, and all the communication and their decisions were recorded. So this is where I got my data. And then there was a debriefing session, which is the most important part of these types of games. You need to have a debriefing at the end. And I had made a written feedback form to also get more data, whether they liked the game, whether they had fun, and then other specific data that I needed to collect to make some of these results. I didn't want to go too into deep on the science of it. I can always send you my paper or thesis if you're really interested. But what I found was my main research question was, okay, I want to make a model that simulates how farmers save water or use water in general. What theory do I use? There's so many out there in sociology. There's so many behavioral theories. I didn't know which one to use. and I didn't know what were the most important decision or social parameters that were connected to those behavior theories. So with the game, I was able to identify that there is not one theory that works. It actually changes throughout time. So at the beginning, they might be like, oh, I need to save water. So they plan more their behavior. Once they get used to it and everything works out, it's a completely different behavior theory. And then how, yeah, communication and trust and competence change throughout the game, which was then used to make a model where I combined all of these things. Another thing was, once this was finished, once I was finished with my PhD, I was asked to make this as a computer model, so to play it within conferences and so on. And I did, and it has been in AGU and EGU, and most recently, like last month or something like that, in the Stockholm World Water Week, and I wasn't even there. So this is living without me. People are playing, they just need the rule book, and then it's there. And it's pretty amazing. I've gotten an email by Bosch lately, like they want to buy my game. You know, it's just like, I'm not selling it, but here are the files. This is so cool. And another important thing that I gotten out of this game is I'm here because of this game. I actually met Sam in EGU when I was showing off the game, and this was the first connection. And then we just stayed in touch, and now I'm here. So for me, games are really, really important and really powerful. In this talk, if I want to, one objective was to ignite your imagination. These games support emotional connections like no other medium out there. And they're a really effective tool for learning and research. NASA said 2023 is the year of open science, with a strong emphasis on expanding opportunities for the public and for public engagement. Geoscience-based games have a whole, like an immense potential to fill this gap as open science. They make topics like climate change not only accessible, but also fun, which is very important nowadays. So I hope you find this information kind of useful and inspire you to make games, to enhance your research. If that's the case, I'm here to help you or to collaborate. That's also another potential of these games. You collaborate with people that you never would have expected, with artists, with, yeah, like, I wouldn't, but I did ask a friend to make some of the designs for my game, but it's super interdisciplinary approach. So thank you so much. If you have any questions, you can ask me, or we can hear about the series game that we have been working on the last couple of days from Andy. Yeah.
Question.
Yeah, so
So can a serious game be locked-in versus the durable?
yeah, of course, you can add the mechanics that you're more comfortable with. So for example, if you want to make a game about teaching a specific topic, like the one we're making, it is more log based than the one I made. You just shuffle cards and then you get that base log. It doesn't have to be specific.
So, but if you're using it to teach, if you're using it to teach a scenario, would then that be a scenario that in your life would be locked-in? So I'm still thinking sustainability.
Yeah,
So
I
if you're
think-
going through the life cycle of maybe a plastic, a piece of plastic, like maybe is that where you start to add elements of loss in actually what that will be?
it really depends on the goal that you want to take. If it's about teaching sustainability, I would say you can totally add log base. If it's about experiencing that real life scenario as it really happens, then I would suggest something more towards a strategy, or less log. But at the end of the day, for example, in my game, rain was one dice because there was no way I could have added. I would need a model that would like capture the precipitation. So I was just like, forget it, it's just one dice, and then this is how much rain you have. So there's still log elements in there that you can add. But yeah, it all depends on the goal that you have of your game. Okay. Any other questions?
You always ask the same question first.
Sure.
Okay.
All right, I guess I'll take over. Let's
Yeah.
see. We'll do it this way, sure.
Everything is just, okay. Yeah, there you go.
Cool, all right. I'm just gonna put it in my pocket. All right, so, hello. I'm really excited to show you all what we've been working on these past few months with conjunction with Malena. Where'd she go? Did she just? You like blended in with the chair. I don't know what's going on with my eyesight. I'm really sorry. All right. Anyway, that was embarrassing. So, it was really a great coincidence because Melina and I are both big board game geeks. In my theory about why, if you've been noticing there's like a board game resurgence, I think a lot of that is a response to a deeper addiction to technology and cell phones. And I think there's a stronger focus now of getting away from the screens. And I think that's one of the reasons why I was drawn to that and find them so fun. And so for me, on my end, for those online who can't see me, I'm Andy. I am an educator at the Kansas Geological Survey. I wear many hats, but the primary two would be outreach and education in terms of going and seeing the public and creating educational materials for classrooms and visiting said classrooms. And so when I started a year ago, I did a big cross state interview of teachers, and whether it's on the ground level or higher up administrators, and about like the current status of geology in Kansas, teaching geology in the classroom environment. And out of the four main disciplines, when you have like biology, physics, chemistry, and then geology, geology is the least supported science of those four topics. There's a biological teachers association. There's a big group of physics and chemists. But geology is not one of them. In fact, we are seeing a remarkable decrease in taking geological classes in high school. The last time I was required when I grew up here in Kansas to take geology was in 7th grade. And that was just optional in high school. And so one thing that I was picking up from teachers is that it's not the lack of enthusiasm, but the lack of adequate resources and background knowledge needed to teach said topics. And so my goal was to help kind of create said resources to give them that edge, that ability to, that last hurrah, middle school, maybe that last required time that students can get exposed to geology. So let's give them that like a really good last hurrah, because they might not get it in high school. And so as I'm talking to teachers, one of the biggest requested topics I got was aquifers. Aquifers are a very big deal. I don't think I need to tell anyone here in the classroom about this. But aquifers are a very big deal for Kansans, particularly for Western Kansans. And so teachers really wanted materials of how to properly educate, excite, and engage their students in the classroom environment. And so over the summer, my team and I basically created educational materials for teachers in relations to aquifers. So the goal was to create a wide range of aquifer-based activities that complement the geographic and science standards. And so as an educator, for me personally, what I like to try to do is I like to try to find a wide variety of ways that students can engage with the material. So what does that look like? So first we made a video. That's great. It's online right now. Aquifers of Kansas, 5 minutes long, very nice, good crash course on the material. We made activities related to maps where students can observe maps of precipitation across the state, aquifer locations, water usage. We have robust data here at the Kansas Geological Survey on aquifers. So we did an activity where students can go on to our High Plains Aquifer Interactive Atlas and track individual wells, and they can make their own conclusion, their own analysis of the data of how these wells are looking like throughout the years. They can also model an aquifer, which is what that bucket on the right-hand side of the screen is. Basically, it's students take a bucket, they fill it up with sand. There's a little paper towel for the paper roll in the center there. That's the well. And so basically they fill it up with water, they put a little soap pump in it, and they measure the well, just like the model, just like how geohydrologists would measure aquifers. And then finally, they can play Ogallala. That's the name of the card game that we produce that puts students in the roles of farmers in Western Kansas and understand how agricultural decisions impact aquifer levels. And this is really big of me to say this, but you know about that scene in Apollo 13 where they're like, we got these are the materials they're working with. We gotta like take all these materials and try to get our boys home, you know? That's kind of like how I felt, but at a much, much lower stakes level. Because we wanted to make these easy to produce and inexpensive. And that's how like a lot of these like the maps you can easily print out, the water data is available online. The models, you can create things that are around the area that many people should already have. And then finally, Ogallala was the most challenging example of that. We wanted to create an engaging board/card game without teachers necessarily having to go out of the way and buy extra materials. And so all these, I feel like, are, well, we'll see, you know, like this is the exciting thing that we're at right now. Yeah, sure, go for it. That's the exciting thing is right now we are testing out these activities. We send them out to our first dozen or so teachers who wanted to test these out. So we'll hear back from them. So if you come back to me like a few months or a year from now, things may be different or updated. And so the Ogallala card game was designed to create a meaningful way, an exciting way, a fun way to learn about aquifers in a classroom environment. So the important messages that we kind of honed in on was that, so for instance, when I say animals and plants, I'm talking about agriculture. So some animals and plants require more water than others. Another thing we wanted to get across was that the aquifer is a shared resource in that one player's usage affects the rest of the player's usage of said resource. If you were to completely drain the water, that's going to affect everyone in the game. We are going to also introduce rain to replenish said aquifer, but the rain doesn't replenish the aquifer at the rate that it's being drained at. And then finally, technology can be used to reduce water usage. There are a lot of other messages that we were hoping to get across, but here's the, yeah, we can go on to the next slide. Here's the thing is that all these had to be structured for a middle school audience. And so a lot of times, this was the hardest part for me when designing this game, is we would come up with a really cool idea, and then we would play test it, and then we would realize this, it may be fun, or maybe add an extra level of complication that takes the game and just spreads it much longer than it needs to be. And like one of the limitations that I would be timing the test subjects and be like, okay, we're going to try to get for 45 minutes in a standard classroom environment. And because of which we would have to cut a lot of things or reduce it or simplify it in order to reach that 45 minutes. And so, and the concept of the game, which I haven't explained yet, which I'll do right now, is that students are farmers. They get a chance to pick 6 of these animals or plants that they can use in their farm. And so basically we made a little board where students can help keep track of their water usage and the amount of money they get. And then each student gets 3 fields. So each field will have a different animal or plant that they can use. Maybe they do all of the same animal or plant or any kind of variety, but they keep track of their profits, which is the money you see there, and they keep track of how much water they use. And at this point, I should definitely give a shout out to Sunday Siomares. She is our outreach intern. She did a wonderful job on the artwork. I was so happy with how it turned out. And especially a big shout out to the pig, which is her favorite, which I think is especially adorable. I think she did a great job on them. But anyway, so all the water usage that you see here, this was not just picked randomly. This was drawn from real life water measurements of how much these agricultural animals and plants use. And it's pretty much 1-to-1, which is great. So when you see on, for instance, the soybean says -2 water, that's how much you take out from the aquifer. That means that in real life, it takes about 2,000 liters of water to raise 1 kilogram of soybean. And so I was like, oh, that's really good. So I just took the 2,000 and just made it down to 2, made it like a very easy number, and just spread it across the animals here. So already these are a reflection or a model of real life of what animals and plants may use more water than others. So throughout the game, they reduce the water from a shared aquifer, their resource, and they replenish the aquifer with rain cards. That's okay. Let's see. I'm just trying to, yeah. So at the beginning of every round, the students may draw a rain card. So in this one, it says add 10 water per player. So if there's 4 players, they would add 40 water. But there'll sometimes be drought cards. And so in that case, no water will be added to the aquifer. And so throughout the game, they are challenged to create a sustainable resource in their farm. And I learned a lot about Excel, math, and computations during this time. And I made it so that if all the players played the max amount of water usage, like pigs and cows, you are going to run out of water halfway through the game. And if the water runs out, then everyone loses. And so there's this real element of kind of like you're competing against each other, but if you overdo it, everyone's going to lose the game. So you got to try to survive to 6 rounds in order to survive. But it's not all gloom and doom, because you can also use technology to help replenish, help reduce your water usage, help increase your profit, or do forecasting ability. So these are all technologies based on real life technologies that farmers use, such as better housing for chickens that may help reduce water usage for them. Or they may have plant hybridization that makes them more drought tolerant. So this gets kids thinking about like, how do we replenish the water without necessarily like breaking the bank? And so in this case, when we on our third step to create, we want to make them easy to print out and play, and have a high emphasis on symbol recognition and easy readability. So we put a high, like the nice clear wordings, large ones, and then have emphasis on color, like for the red, for instance, the drought is to show that like no water done. And I should have mentioned this. I should have put this in earlier, but your comment earlier about luck based in games, for us, the luck in this game comes from 2 main sources. The rain, so you're not quite sure. So each round kind of represents a year, if you will, of the game. So you don't know what cards you get. But also, and one of my favorites that someone recommended in one of our playtest sessions is to have a stock market element to the game. So at the end of every round, you draw a stock market card. So in this one, it says, veganism sweeps the nation. Meat makes half its normal profit. And so you may put like some animals in your farm, and you're like, all right, hopefully it's a good year, and it's not. But there may be another year that you put out, and then that you put out chickens, and it says poultry demands are up. Chicken makes an extra $20 each. So it puts in that element of like in real life about how, you know, we may have certain, we may plant things, or we may grow animals or plants. But how does that market look 6 months, 8 months down the line? You can do your best guess, but you never quite know how it rolls out. And that creates some really exciting game developments that we like so far. So now, as Malena says, we are kind of like we're in that loop right now. We're doing that testing feedback loop. And so one of the things that I did when we evaluated, like we reduced the rounds from 8 rounds to 6 rounds to easily fit the 45-minute classroom. We try to streamline the rules and features to make it easy for middle school students to pick up and play. And now the game is out in the wild. It's out in the middle school environments. We tried to make the rules as clear as we could, and we made a little feedback forms and evaluation forms. So like I said, if you come back a few months from now, or better yet, even a year from now, a lot of the things I'll say up here or the design elements may be quite different. Hopefully not like extremely different, but this is an exciting element. People have been asking me like, when are you going to publish the game? When are you going to publish the game? I'm like, I am nowhere near comfortable doing any sort of professional print quality to this. But like I said, the next best thing is that you can still easily print them out and play and have fun with it. And yeah, so if you want to copy a game, you can just email me, try it out with your friends in classroom. I printed out like a version of the game up here that you can take a look at it for yourselves. And yeah, that is the Ogallala card game. Hopefully it's a hit and gets kids thinking about how water usage affects the aquifers and how we can be a sustainable future in aquifer usage. So thank you. And now we can,
I mean, honestly, look at this cute little thing.
yes, again, Sunday did an excellent job.
You don't want to play with the rules and just want to see the cute little.
I can't,
do it.
yeah, I can't emphasize how important design is. Like,
Oh, 100%.
it just goes like, I am a terrible graphic designer and artist. I was like, I don't know what this guy, I was gonna do like stock images, but Sunday actually created these really nice images that I think just did a wonderful job. And so yeah, hats off to her, that's for sure. And she was also important too. I mean, she wasn't just design element, but also for feedback in the rules. We continuously, all three of us and more, tested the game and had some really good discussions about what worked and what didn't. What's up, Blair?
Okay, so if anyone, someone asked a question, we repeat it so they can hear online, but then 2, so is this one a game for education, or is this ultimately going to be like a 2-way street? We're hoping to get some evaluation data. I was thinking about the 3 categories we came up with.
As far as I know, is right now is education, but the point is that we will need this debriefing session after playing the game, and then you can get some data. So as far as my knowledge is just to make kids understand the aquifers and you know the different water uses. But it could be made also to get data from them. Other than, did you like the game? You know, which is your favorite animal?
Yeah.
Stuff like that. Yeah.
All right. Did anyone have any other questions? Oh yes, what's up?
I would think that some games that are based on sustainability might end up being a bit of a downer on people. How do you,
Okay,
make it so that it's like not.
so the question was, how do we create a sustainable game that's not a downer, or in this case,
Or a game for sustainability, because that's another topic that we can talk. Board games are not sustainable. Like the printing of board games is not a sustainable industry, but that's another topic. It really depends on the process. I think most of the time we have this serious topic that we really want to show, and we don't want to make it too fun, right? We don't want to make it too goofy or too, because then it's not serious anymore. It's like climate change. It needs to be like drastic and like when in reality it should not be. It all depends on the game mechanics that you add to it. So what I would say is some of these sustainability games that seem a little bit boring is probably because they didn't have that much time to develop the game, to go through that cycle of testing it again and again, and to find that right fun mechanic that would add it. I know some games that are for sustainability that are incredibly fun. Like, for example, there is one that is a really good board game that I would recommend. It's called Photosynthesis. It's amazing. And the artwork is amazing and super fun. And you are like, wait a second, I'm learning here. There's another one called Wingspan. that now has an app that it's about birds. And how, you know, that they live in an environment that's also pretty cool. And they have these really fun mechanics to it. So, yeah, I would say it's the time.
Yeah, and I agree, and for Ogallala, like, coming from well, I should back up even one step more, but coming as an educator, one thing that I've routinely heard is if you do not frame a message correctly in terms of environmental education, if it's a particularly heavy and downer one, kids are gonna come off feeling depressed and helpless in the said situation. And so when creating this game, it was important to show that it is possible to lose. That if we were to spend our resources unchecked, that it would bite us in the end. That I still wanted to maintain. On the other side, though, this game I wanted to reflect. I described this game as a cooperative game disguised as a competitive game, because you are trying to initially the students may think you're trying to out finance or get the most money or be the most competitive farmer, when in reality you want to work together and not overdraw from the aquifer. And when they kind of come, we're hoping that once they realize that consensus, that they kind of work together to only pull out as much water as they need in order to have a sustainable water system. And I think that emphasis on teamwork, that we are in this together, would hopefully have that kind of like, yes, we can do this, but we have to do this together.
And another thing that I was thinking now was that, like, for example, for my game that I was measuring how communication evolves during the game, at one point I was like, you're not allowed to speak, you're not allowed to talk. You can, like, I keep the board games like each individual board, like, you're not allowed to see each other. And then I saw that was a really bad, it made it really very boring. They couldn't communicate and so on. At the end of the game, some of the feedback that I got from my game is like, this is too long. I was like, yeah, you made it too long. You made it, you chatty all the time and took your sweet time making the decision. I had no control. Like, I wish all my game sessions were like about an hour and then half an hour for debriefing. Sometimes I would stay the whole afternoon because we would play it many times, and I was just like, all right. But that was the goal. Like, I wanted to make a fun board game. So to find that fun in it took a long time. And I do think another part of teamwork is when you're developing these games, you need to collaborate with other disciplines. So I had kind of like the privilege that I knew a lot about board games and I knew about some of the mechanics. Most of these games that you might think, oh, they're boring, no, they're not. They're these like made from researchers that they know lots about topics, but they don't know anything about board games, or they just play Monopoly and they think, I can make my own one. Where I think actually Monopoly is the worst case of mechanics that you can add to a game. That's like, you have to teach something fun or something like that. So I would encourage to, if you have an idea, to ask somebody else, an artist or something, to make that fun really pop out. Like, I think if the first, iterations that we had of this, that we used like other icons and so on, it was like, oh, okay, it's complicated, and then we needed to modify this, and then with the added of this really cool artwork, now it's like really
The artwork is, I can't stress enough how far that goes in making it such a fun, like, aspect to the game. Like, beforehand, it was just bland Times New Roman font on the cards as a basic thing, but then once we started actually putting the elements, and I knew we had like a hit on our hands when the stock market cards were kind of changed up at the end of the round, because people were like, what's it gonna be? What's it gonna be? And when you see that big green arrow with your chicken on it, like, yes. Or when you see a down arrow with your corn, you're like, no. And it's like, it's really gets that element of like just like that risk and laughter with that. Those things like that happen.
So we have a question from online. Sarah asked, both of these things are super cool. Have you gotten any interest in trying these out in college classes?
So the question was, both of these games are really cool. do you have any interest in trying them in the college classroom?
Yes, my game is actually being used back in Germany because the university owns the product because they pay for them. They're using to introduce social hydrology to the master students and the PhD students over there. So I know they played it. And then there is another prototype in ETH in Zurich that they also play. They have like their own serious game, of course, and they play my board game. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
I don't really have, well, because from my end, Ogallala, it was designed specifically for a middle school audience. Not to say that adults can't have fun. A lot of the test runs that we've done, the adults had fun and sometimes wanted to play the game multiple times in a row, which was pretty awesome. We could, but like I said, I'm mainly focused on that public school audience at this time. Yes, we have another question. Oh, so the question was, how did we come up with the name Ogallala? So the Ogallala aquifer is one of the prominent aquifers in western Kansas. And originally this was called, the game was called Aquifers of Kansas game or something like that. Yeah, go one more back, I think.
No, I think here the blue one is the Ogallala.
That's what you meant. That's what you meant. Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, and so then Sunday came up with the name Ogallala. So
No.
was it you?
Yes.
All right, sorry.
I
couldn't remember. I just knew it wasn't me.
And I was in the process of reading about the aquifers of Kansas, and lots of people say the High Plains aquifer. And I was like, it's High Plains Ogallala. You're talking about that specific. Don't remove that name. I really like the word. It sounds fun.
I think it sounds great too, because when you think of a lot of board games that are just like that have a snappy title, like Ogallala is one of them. And this I know Sunday did. She designed the game of it, which I really like the look of that in the end.
Coming back to your comment though, I think one thing to think about for our middle school audiences is, do we have a set of like key takeaway messages that we want the teachers to say after the game? And one of them should really be about that hope. That's when we work together as a team, something can change.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I think. Oh,
sorry. So the comment was about like, how do we have the message that teachers deliver to classrooms, such as the hope, the message being of hope, change, sustainability, and teamwork.
yeah. So part of the cycle of the process, it's also changing the rules. So right now we have like a draft of the rules for the game, and then at the end we will create a rule book where we're hoping to give background information for the teachers, then the rules, and then like take away home messages, all of that in a package. So whenever we send the PDF for them to print, they have all the information, because that's part of the goal, right? We don't just want to like, here are the rules, shuffle this and play, but the goal is for them to learn something.
I think one of my most advanced goals of the Ogallala card game is, if the students like it and if the teachers had enough time, then I think the game would be even more fun if it was team versus team. So these group of farmers, like these 4 students against 4 other students against 4 other students, and they have the goal of like trying to get the highest amount of water in their aquifer by the end of the 6 rounds. And so then I think that's where the real fun would come out of this game, is like, who can be the most sustainable? Oh, yes. So how long does each round last? So typically what we see in board games and in this one is that if the players don't know, or if the players are trying out the game for the first time, the first round is going to usually last the longest. And I've noticed the first round can go like 15 minutes or so. It's going to depend, but then afterwards it's going to get much closer down to like 8 or 5 minutes depending on the players, because then once you understand how each round goes, then there's like a system like, okay, I'm going to play these cards, I'm going to buy this technology, and then we're going to flip over the event card, rinse and repeat. So then after the first round, it's usually much quicker and usually hits that 45-minute window.
And there's also this mechanic that we added that is one player making the decision, and then the other ones wait, and then goes and he goes. So you are really looking how that player made the decision. And because we wanted to put that the first serve first there, right thing that
Oh,
they
yeah.
have here in Kansas, there is like the people that have the first right, they are the ones that take the water first. So yeah, that part. So maybe there is like a intended tempo into the making the decision. It could be way faster if you make all the decisions, simultaneously, but we intended to make it kind of like that.
We also noticed that players tend to slow down, like once the aquifer is hitting a critical level, that's when the decision making becomes a lot more prominent and you're thinking about it. When it seems like you have a high amount, you're like, I'm gonna go for it. Like, I wanna get to make some money. Well, once it hits a more critical low level, that's when they have to really that's when they have to make some serious hard decisions about how to sustain their farm. And then that's when the rounds can increase again.
Right, we're at time. Any other questions? One more question? Okay, thank you both so much. This was awesome. Appreciate it. All right, so our next one is gonna be October 27th at SNS. So join us there, and thanks. Grab some seats on the way out.